Okay, great. Aileen, thank you so much for doing this and coming on board and talking to me for the next hour or so. I think this is a subject we can talk for a very long time about, but I'm going to be mindful of our time. So before we get into this, let me just explain a little bit about the purpose of these interviews. So I'm very much interested in and specialize in corporate culture and the culture space, workplace culture. And for the last month and a half, I've been exploring culture with different experts in the area of their passion. You know, looking at culture from their lens and trying to understand, well, you know, how do we create a culture of inclusion or mindfulness into the workspace, or create an effective coaching culture, and etc. etc. So in this one, I really wanted to focus on mental health, and I couldn't think of anyone else that was better for this. So let me introduce you, Aileen, to everyone. So you're Chief Executive Officer of Grand Union Housing Group, and you're the current president of the Chartered Institute of Housing, the professional body for those working in housing. Qualified coach and an NLP master practitioner. Can I just say, I didn't know you were an NLP master practitioner, so I now know where to come to. You have a strong interest in understanding healthy organizational cultures and the impact this has on performance. You're an emerging mental health campaigner. And as part of your presidential campaign, what I've got written here is that you're working with the mental health charity Mind to provide a guide for housing organizations on creating mental health organizations. And you've got a fundraising target of 50K to support Mind this year. I think that's amazing, amazing initiative. And we can talk a little bit more about what that actually means and what you've raised so far. So welcome, Aileen. Thank you so much again for your time today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much for having me.
I do tend to talk quite a lot, so I'm going to try and pause as much as possible and give you the space, if that's okay.
That's okay, don't worry.
So we're going to start with something really simple. Let's talk about mental health. What do we mean by that when we talk about mental health? What does it actually mean?
So my belief, and I think it's one that's widely shared, is we all have mental health. At any one time, we're all on a continuum of feeling great, feeling not so great, and most of the time kind of bumping along in the middle. But it's about being able to, so if we're mentally healthy, we can make the most of all our potential, we can cope with life, we can play a full part in our family, our workplace, and the life that you know that we want. And when we're not feeling mentally healthy, and I think we all have periods in our lives where we don't feel so mentally healthy. Sometimes we need a bit of support. Sometimes we need to understand what we need to do ourselves. And so for me, you know, mental health is a continuum, and it's something that we all have. And you know, put really simply, you know, it's all of our business. It happens. It is present in all of our lives. It's present in the lives of the people around us. And so for me, it's about being alive to the changes in us and the changes in people around us in organisations, so that we can respond either ourselves or as leaders in organisations think about how we need to respond actually to help people be well and happy. It's equally as important as physical health. In my view, I'm a firm believer in mind and body being part of the same system, and one thing that, you know, things that impact us in one part of us impact us in the other. And so for me, that's really what mental health is.
Great. And just going to digress slightly, why do you think we tend to shy away from talking about mental health? Just before we talk about why you're passionate about it, why do people shy away from talking about it?
Well, because I think hitherto it was seen as a bit of a weakness, wasn't it? It's been, whereas I think showing one's vulnerability is a strength, and I think there's an emerging recognition that being vulnerable and showing those vulnerabilities, you know, I'm not Superwoman, I'm not, and you know, neither are people who lead organisations like mine. We're not super, we're just people, we have the same pressures, We deal
Yes.
with the same pressures, but they're not talked about because I think it's seen as something of a weakness. It's a bit taboo. And the other thing is that people don't know what to say, in response to somebody disclosing that they're not feeling mentally well, or need some support. And so I think, and people don't know what to do, and that makes for awkwardness and difficulty. And I think that's why it has hitherto been something that is not talked about as much as it should. We're getting better. We're getting better as organisations, and there are a number of people around now who say how they feel. And I have found that sharing how I am at Grand Union has been, you know, a really positive experience, not just for me, but for the people around me and for the organisation as a whole. So I think it's been taboo because people didn't know what to do with it, really, and thought it was something to be ashamed of.
It feels like such a missed opportunity, I suppose, because we could have been dealing with this for so long, but we've hidden from it more than anything.
Yeah.
And that is such a shame, really. But I'm glad we're now working towards revealing and making it more transparent and so on. So I think that's really important. And can we talk a little bit about why you're so passionate about mental health? Is it okay for you to share with us that?
So I'll tell you a little bit about my story. And you know, I'll preface this with, not everybody has to feel that they have to say, you know, they have to tell it all. I'm talking about it because as a leader in organisations, and one of the things I want to do is help people be open about it. And I think giving that example is vitally important. And in the context of the CIH presidential campaign, it would have been disingenuous of me to have talked about mental health in organisations without talking about my own, particularly when I'm trying to encourage other people. So I grew up in a household with a father who suffered of depressive illness all of his life. He was a lovely, thoughtful, really kind, happy man on some occasions, but most of the time, and increasingly as he got older, he was quite sad, angry, frustrated. And as children, we didn't know which parent we were going to go home to. And that bred in me, and I think to a certain extent in my brother and sister, but certainly bred in me an anxiety about, so when I go home, what will I face? And so that it took me quite a lot of years to understand that's where my anxiety came from, was never knowing which dad I was going to go home to. Was it going to be the sullen, withdrawn, angry, cross? There was no physical abuse or anything of that nature, but actually his depressive illness, his best friend, we regarded him as an uncle. My uncle committed suicide when I was about 5. My uncle Ivan. I don't think my dad ever really got over that. Right. And he attempted suicide himself when I was 15. So you know, it was present in my life from an early age. And then my husband, coincidentally, whose father also had a kind of an undiagnosed depressive illness, I think, was so my husband became quite ill just after we were married, and that was partly work-related stress and an inability to cope with some of the demands that were being placed upon him. But he recovered from that. And then he went to work for a well-known British company, and their workplace mental health support and their workplace practice was shocking. It was completely, truly appalling. And as a consequence of that, I mean, you know, there is the he was ill actually for some years. My twins were 5. We have my twins are 12 now, but my twins were 5 at the time. And And he phoned me from the railway station one day, catching the train into work, and he said, Aileen, I don't know whether or not to get on this train or jump in front of it. And at that point, I just said, so stay there. And I went home from work, and I went to the railway station, picked up his bike, got him home, got him to see a GP. And he was severely depressed, and that was solely as a result of work-related stress. He'd had a new boss. What had happened was that the chap just kept on giving him work and giving him work and giving him work, and Mark's quite mild and didn't kind of protest against this and said, actually, hang on a minute, which do you want first? I could do this. Or and so that just kind of, that took him under. I'm well and truly under. You know, I would go to work and I would wonder what I would find when I came back, if I would find if I would find a husband. And so I was juggling. So the impact then on me was that I was juggling work. I was managing director of Arrogant Housing Association at the time, and trying to hold it all together for everybody else. And do you know what? There's only so long you could do that. But, you know, by contrast, when my husband, for example, rang his boss up to say, I can't come into work today because I've been to the doctors and I've been signed off. And he was never, ever off sick before that, never, ever off sick. He rang his boss, and he picked up the phone and said, hello, it's Mark. And his boss said, Mark who? But my experience was completely different to that. So when I talked to my then boss, Alan Humphreys, about it, and talked to my GP about it, I had the best sort of support. I had, so it was quite a lot more than cutting me a bit of slack as far as work was concerned. Alan would say, well, don't you worry about that, I'll pick that up. Or, you know, do you need some time? If you need to go, whatever you need to do. He was, he was really great. And I took some medication for a while. I got myself some counselling. But what that enabled me to do was to be in a good place to support my family and to make sure that I was, because somebody needed to hold this together, and Mark couldn't do it. So we were lucky, actually, to be able to afford some really good counselling for Mark. He was medicated for quite a long time, but essentially he gave up work. We made that decision. Again, we were lucky to be able to do that. And apart from the occasional blip, his mental health has been really good since. And we're in a good place and in a family that works for us. And you know what? We know the signs now. We know the signs for both of us. So he'd say, you know, you sure you're all right? Well, no, maybe I need a bit of, or I will do the same with him. And so that's where it comes from. That's a very short potted history of my mental health challenges. The other thing that I would say is, and the other thing that we really, really don't talk about enough, that happens to 50% of the population, and I am is experienced in some way or other by the whole population, is the menopause. Because, you know, I just got through all of that and the menopause hit. My confidence, there was this angry person in my head who wanted to shout at everybody all the time. Well, you know me and you've known me for a long time. Actually, I'm quite positive and happy. And,
yes, I agree, yeah.
So, you know, so this angry person in my head just wanted to yell at people. And I didn't know where that person had come from. And I completely lost confidence in all sorts of things. So, for example, driving a car, could barely get in the car to go to work. It's because, you know, that my confidence had been so severely affected. And I wondered what it was for a while. And then when I understood what it was and I enabled myself and I was able to deal with it. But, you know, we just really need to talk about the menopause quite a lot more.
Oh, of course. I mean, I think it's a subject in itself, isn't it, Aileen? It's the whole women's health and so on, and how we can do more in that space. But certainly, I mean, just what you've talked about, and you know, I honor you for sharing your story and your experience, because I think it's what you've said right at the beginning, is we don't share enough of these experiences, because, and the word you used was, it's taboo. It has been taboo. And I really, you know, I do definitely, you know, completely honor you for sharing that experience. Thank you. And I resonate with it, because I think, you know, we work hard, we work for a long time, we work, you know, we put hours in, or we take more and more activities on, because we are the people who do the work and get the effort done and get those projects done and so on. And then, you know, if your home life and your work life are not marrying up, or your work life is causing you anxieties and has an impact on your home life, and then, you know, all of these things that come about, we often say, and I've often reflected on this over the years, and it's taken me a long time to understand this, is that we don't leave our work, we don't leave our home at work, we don't leave our home at home when we go to work, and we don't leave work at work when we go home.
No, there is no such thing in my view as work-life balance. There is only life.
Yes, I agree.
And you know, what happens in one impacts on the other. You know, the person who's having challenges with their child, or an ill partner, or illness themselves, they're going to be thinking about that at work. Of course they are. And so actually, if they're then able to talk about it at work and get some support with it at work, then, you know, isn't that better for them? And it's better for everybody, because we'll all understand what's going on for them.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think this is about evolving organizations. I mean, one of the things I've been thinking about is that historically, you know, companies, organizations have not considered mental health of their employees. And, you know, there could be also a sense of, this is not our area of responsibility. We don't have a duty of care in that way. That's why we have GPs and surgeries and our NHS and so on and so on. So it's not their responsibility. Employers don't necessarily see it in that light. So I feel something's changing here, because I am seeing organizations have more mental health aiders, for example.
Yeah.
There is a movement here. Why is this changing? Why do you know, what's going on?
I mean, I think there are a number of reasons, but for the finance people amongst us who measure everything by the bottom line, if I use my organisation as an example, the year before last, 34% of our staff absence was mental health related. Not all work related stress. There were a couple of cases of that, but it was bereavement, relationship breakdown, challenges with children, illness, all sorts of things. 34%. That cost us £118,000. It's £118,000. Now, as a result of being more open and more and putting more support around mental health, and people being able to say how they feel, we are dealing with those sorts of things much more quickly, and our mental health related absence is dropping. Still got a couple of long-term, very complex cases, but generally speaking, our anxiety and stress-related instances are dropping. One of the reasons for that is that recently, well, one of the things that people worry a lot about that causes some poor mental health is money. And we partner with the the Centre for Financial Education to and it's not expensive, but it's something that the people who work at Grand Union can access, and they can access information about debt, how to cope with it, whether or not any of them might qualify for any benefits. They can talk about pensions. They will help them with mortgages and cheaper broadband deals and all sorts of things. And so for a very small amount of money as an employer, actually we've put something in there that supports people with stress-related, money-related stress. And so I think then it's about it isn't just about talking about how we feel all the time. It's about how we address some of those practical issues. So coming back to the money, I think there's some data out there that says that is something like £6 billion is lost in mental health related absence from work. So think about how much more productive your organisation would be if you could deal with those things early, because people felt comfortable about raising them. We had an instance. I put my mental health form score on our intranet occasionally. You'll have seen it. So it's something that was developed by a guy called Rob Stevenson of Inside Out, and I'll give you the link so that you can put it on. And you could just fill in a little chart. It's got 10 indicators. You mark them out of 10. You do the average. And it's, am I worried about money? Have I had enough sleep? Have I had enough exercise? What am I, those sorts of things. And I put my form score up and said, I'm a 7 out of 10 today. I'm feeling really well motivated, but I could do with a bit more sleep, and I'm looking forward to getting some exercise at the weekend. Somebody posted a form score of 2 out of 10, which was a cry for help. But by the time I'd got back to the office, somebody had had a conversation with that person. We established that they were in some difficult home circumstances, as well as dealing with some difficult work circumstances just by the nature of the job that they were doing. And in 3 weeks, we had that person in another job. They didn't go off sick. We paid for some counselling to enable them to get better and deal with some of the issues. And they're now back in their original job because they had a bit of a moment. We supported them through it. I'm not sure that had we not been able to be open about mental health, I'm not sure that those things would have happened in quite the same way. So good mental health saves organisations money. Good mental health support saves organisations money. But we have a really happy, very supportive culture at Grand Union. It's the sort of culture that supports individuals when they're struggling, if we know about the fact that they're struggling. And as a consequence of that, I think we're quite high performing. It's one of the ingredients in our performance recipe. And so that's another reason why organisations, I think, should take this seriously.
Yeah. What I'm hearing from you is there's some key, you said it says in itself it's an ingredient, but I think some of the things that you're doing that enable people to be able to speak up safely, right? So this is about, if we're coming from a place where traditionally, and an organisation, a leader listening to you talk about this might think, well, we're not quite ready for this. We don't talk about mental health in our workplace. And we haven't done any work in this space. We haven't actually even explored how many of our people who are on sick leave are due to mental health related challenges or problems or experiences. So we might be there might be organizations on different level or spectrum of where they are on this journey. And I think the things you're talking about are sort of creating that environment where, one, we can have the conversation about mental health. And I do think, actually, you said it right at the beginning, this isn't necessarily an invitation for people listening to this to share their own stories, but I do think there is an element of that. So if we're confident about sharing our own stories, other people will relate to them in their own experience.
Yeah.
There's something about that, leading with examples or leading by experience, or or acknowledging that we all have. And I think I wrote down here, experience of mental health varies from one person to another. Excuse me. Sorry. I think that's the thing. Is also about bringing light to it, isn't it? It's bringing it out of the dark and into the open, so that people can feel confident. So creating that space to enable people to speak, but then you seem to have processes as well.
Yeah. So no, I mean, it's so one of the things that I've done with the CIH is produce this guide. It's downloadable from it's in mirror image there, but it's downloadable from the CIH website, from the Grand Union website, and from the Mind website. So it's a commitment guide for the housing sector. And this came about, so on top of my own experience, I was sitting in our housing team a little while ago, a couple of years ago now, and somebody said, has anybody got the hoarding spreadsheet open? And actually what we were dealing with a range of hoarding cases amongst our tenants. You very rarely came across hoarding when I was a housing officer, but hoarding is symptomatic of poor mental health. And actually, as welfare reform has been, and particularly in COVID, what we are seeing now is an increase in mental health challenges as far as our tenants are concerned. And we're releasing a companion guide to that in September, that talks about how we as housing professionals can support tenants' mental health, because I think often we don't do anything because we're frightened of doing the wrong thing. But if our staff are dealing with mentally challenging situations, they themselves will have some challenges to their mental health, and actually they'll probably lose a bit of compassion. And what I want is that our staff will retain that compassion, that they'll see each new issue as a new issue, and not, oh, do you know what, the last time I had that, this is what happened. And so for me then, that is about prioritising mental health and mental health support as one of the things that enables people to download, get some support, and go out again with compassion and deal with a new thing as a new thing. So, and I can appreciate that I'm sitting here talking about my mental health, and leaders who are watching this thinking, well, that's a bit of a stretch for me. I can't quite see myself doing that. So start small. Download the Action for Happiness calendar from the Action for Happiness website. It's, they produce one every month. It's about little things. So it's little things that get a conversation going. Then you can talk about the ways most employee assistance programs, for example, will have some mental health related support components, some telephone counselling service or something like that. So you can talk about things you've already got in place to support good mental health. Then you can work with your team to develop an action plan that says, so what does good mental health look like in my organisation? What do we need to do to be able to achieve that? And you develop a work plan. And in that way, you begin to prioritise mental health. And people then understand that it's okay not to be okay. And it's okay to tell people they're not okay. So that's the kind of, they're the things I would start with. Start small. Don't go for the jugular straight away. The nuclear option of the chief executive standing up and saying, do you know what, I feel really, really rubbish today, might not be what, that needs to be done in a context, and that context needs to be carefully created.
As you talk about this, again, those steps you've taken and they're starting small and so on, the word that keeps coming back to me is, and you've mentioned it, is compassion.
Yeah.
So, you need to be perhaps it's almost like, well, what kind of characteristic or competency do we need as an organisation to enable us to take mental health seriously? And I think I fundamentally think it's compassion.
No, absolutely. I don't talk about resilience in our organisation, because resilience is that pull yourself together word for me. I talk about compassion a lot, and kindness. Kindness is on that spectrum with compassion, that caring. And we've got an intranet at work where people can thank people who've supported them in any little way. They can give them bonusly points, they can give them a shout out, and it's that putting those little things in place that encourage people to say thank you, that encourage a culture of gratitude. I think that's another way of supporting people, but just start off by making a plan. Look at best practice around the world, around your bit of the world, and think about what you'll have a rich source of information in your organisation, in the feedback of your employees. Ask them what they think, and ask them what they think needs to happen. They'll tell you. Particularly if you've demonstrated that you can be trusted with that information, and you'll be honest and open about the way that you will deal with it.
Sure. Yeah. So you've been working with CIH as president this last year, and you've got a campaign going on you want to talk a little bit about that and sort of share some information about that? And
yeah, so what I wanted to do with the campaign was not just raise money. For me, it was about raising awareness, starting a conversation about mental health, leaving a bit of a legacy that said, you know, we could be better as organisations, which is where the commitment guide came from. And so we've developed these resources with Mind. And then another thing I am really excited about, so there's the Tenants Guide coming out in September. That's not to turn all housing professionals into mental health professionals, but there are really easy things that we can do, like think about the way we write letters to people. So we've stopped writing letters that say the consequence of you not paying your rent is that you could be evicted. Actually, we say, please contact us and talk about what is stopping you from paying your rent, because we might be able to help. Completely different conversation and everything. It
is, yeah.
And really, really simple stuff. There's nothing rocket sciencey about that. So I'm excited about that, and that's coming out soon. We've worked with some tenants to shape that. It's been a bit of a challenge during lockdown, but we've done it nonetheless. But then the incoming president of the Chartered Institute of Housing is Professor Joe Richardson of De Montfort University. And we had worked around, one of the things I know that we have, or that is widely accepted, is we have a challenge in housing about as I think is across most professions these days, about getting talented young people. You know, housing isn't necessarily a career of choice for people, but I think once you get in housing, it does become a career of destination. You tend not to leave. So how can we get those bright people to come and be housing's future? Well, we know that millennials have the highest levels of anxiety in organisations. So we worked with Joe to scope a study, which we've just completed the research element of, the fieldwork, where we asked young people who were already working in housing what they need in order to feel psychologically safe and to be and to alleviate some of that anxiety. There's an awful lot going on for younger people now. My stepdaughter, for instance, says, you know, she wants work of meaning, and I think we're really well placed to provide that. So we did a survey, and then never want to waste a good crisis. We also surveyed chief executives about their mental health during the COVID crisis, and we've also done some work in surveying homelessness organisations who have suffered a double whammy of having a reduction in funding because they're not able to fundraise quite so easily, and also more work. So there'll be a short guide released sort of October, November time, and then the full report which has some practical stuff. We'll have some practical stuff drawn from research experience, properly vetted by the ethics committee of De Montfort University, that we hope will add to the weight of literature and evidence that says, as organisations, if we want to be successful in the future, this is what we need to be. So 3 big pieces of work throughout the presidency, and then I set myself a fundraising target of £50,000. As a result of that, I mean, in lockdown, I dyed my hair purple. That raised £2,000. Well, actually, I let my kids dye my hair purple, which probably wasn't quite so wise. But the work that Mind do in supporting a good mental health in organisations, but their telephone helpline, for example, you know, stops people committing suicide. It's that important. So we're at just over £30,000 now on our Just Giving page. So I would give you the link for that. And if anybody does want to donate, the work, it has never been more needed than it is now. The ONS said that 75% of people had suffered anxiety as a result of COVID. Yes. Now, and there's been an increased number of suicides as a result of that. I heard of one just yesterday of somebody who lived alone, whose life kind of fell apart when they couldn't get out and go anywhere and you know, and go and see friends. And so we have really high rates of male suicide. It's the biggest killer for men under 40. 2 men a day working in the construction industry take their own lives. 2 men a day. And so, you know, if that was an epidemic of an infection or an illness, actually we'd all be shouting about it. We'd be doing something about it. So I want to shout about it, really, and do something about it. And the campaign, raising money, raising awareness, providing some research and some evidence that says, here guys, there's some stuff we can do here, is what I want to achieve as part of it, really.
I think it's amazing that the work you've done so far, and in such a short space of time, really, you know.
I've had very, very massive help. I've gathered capable people around me who can do things. It's always a good way. So I know this is very much a team. It's very much a team effort. There's been some amazing people that have supported the team at CIH, previous presidents of the CIH who kind of showed me the way. Rob Stevenson from Inside Out, who showed to me very powerfully that you can talk about mental health. And that it will have an impact on people and help them, you know, help them have conversations. Yeah. So this is, you know, this is a team effort, really.
So and you also lead Grand Union Housing Group, and you've talked a little bit about Grand Union and some of the work being done there. But can I take you back a little bit to something you said earlier about the mental health form score? You definitely lead by example because you're putting that up there. Is there anything else that you're bringing into Grand Union that is enabling people to have those conversations? Are there processes or systems, and then say employee assistance programs? You know, what does it manifest as something, steps that, you know, an organisation can put in place?
Yes, well, the commitment guide actually has some very good how-to guides. We nicked that from UK Sport. UK Sport have got one. Yeah. And there's one for the building industry called Building Better Mental Health. And there's a one in police, the police and blue light brigades called Oscar Kilo, oscarkilo.co.uk. Are all very practical. This is how you create a positive mental health culture. But for us, it's about creating that openness. Yep. But, you know, when we think about the design of work, for example, the highest turnover jobs in our organisation are the ones that are the most boring. Well, we shouldn't really be surprised at that, should we? But if you're doing a really boring, repetitive job, and that's not what you want to be doing, that will impact on your mental health. You'll be leaving that job or wanting to leave that job because it's not doing anything for you. So thinking about work design and artificial intelligence and robotics gives us a wonderful opportunity to take the routine, the robotic processes, and get rid of those from jobs so that we can focus on human beings adding value, not just to the organisation but themselves. They're doing work that's absorbing and interesting. So I think you need to think about, you know, that mental health plan, but thinking about how you design work. And I think we are beginning to do that at Grand Union now. And robotics, we've had a big transformation program over. I hate the word transformation because it sounds like something was bad and we're transforming it into something better. But actually, in terms of embracing digital, for us, it's not just about how our tenants access our services, and our tenants will always be able to see a human being if they want to see one. We'll never ever take that away. But if we think about what artificial intelligence and robotics gives us, it gives us the ability to design better, more interesting jobs. Why wouldn't you use it? So we're, you know, just starting with all of that. We took a bit of a halt on that at the start of lockdown, but we've picked that up again and we're running with it. We've just gone digital, we're live with a digital allocations process, looking at digital repairs processes, but things like scanning deed packets over to the bank, you know, somebody used to have to do that.
Yes.
There's a whole load of stuff that you can scoot out of jobs now quite easily, where you just think, and so I've often heard saying, well, can't we get a computer to do that? Can't we get a process to do that? So it's that sort of thing. Let's create jobs of meaning and value where people feel that they're adding value. And that's part of your overall plan. But then there's the practical stuff like mindfulness sessions and yoga for people that want to do it. Not everybody will want to do it. Some people will think you're mad, and that's fine. Specific interest groups. There's talk of us forming a menopause group, and I'm aware of some organisations that have formed men-only groups to talk about male, in particular the stuff around male mental health, because probably less likely to talk about it. So Toolbox Talks in our internal repairs team that will focus on mental health, all of those sorts of things. And we, I have an Ask Aileen, so people can email and ask me stuff. There's any range of ways that people can access that support, and it doesn't need to be by posting a video on the internet. There's loads of discrete ways to do it, and you need to find something that supports everybody. And people actually also, where there have been some challenges, and people around those individuals who are aware of that, if they see how they've been supported and treated, they're more likely to come forward when they're not feeling great, because they know they'll be taken seriously, they'll be listened to, and we'll work hard to find a solution. And that's what, they're the things that I would take. I would take from that. So we recruit. We've recruited through lockdown, and I did an induction the other week that said, I've come to work here because you're really open about mental health, and I've had some challenges, so I've been open with you, and that's absolutely fine.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's a real measure, isn't it, of the organisation transparency in this as well. You can have something coming and applying deliberately in that way. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. So in thinking as well, when people are off, about how they return to work, again, it's about compassion, it's about commitment, and it's about understanding, and it's about understanding that good mental health is a partnership between organisations and individuals. It's not all about the organisations, and it's not all about the individuals. Individuals need to take some responsibility for their mental health, and by working together, you can put the stuff in place that helps people do that. So that's what we do, really.
Again, you said earlier on about the financial, the financial measure, the bottom line impact, but actually, we used to say we still do, we measure organisations by their financial health. But I think we now can start talking about organisations from an organisation, collective mental health of the organisation.
Yeah.
I mean, I've not heard of anyone talk about that, but I certainly think we can start talking about that. Because
I think so. Creating those spaces that are, we talk a lot about psychological safety. For me, that's just about creating a decent, nice place to work, where people feel at home and comfortable, people feel valued. We're still high performing, we've still got good key performance measures. Through lockdown, we've seen our staff consistently go not just one extra mile, but several. And I think, part of that is because we've worked hard, all of us, to create that culture where people are valued, and valued in all sorts of different ways. And just, thinking about the financial stuff, Moody's last week regarded Lloyds Bank's diversity strategy as credit positive. So, think about the creation of diverse organisations, diverse mentally healthy organisations, because diversity is not just a thing in itself, it's part of something else, but creating diverse organisations that have good mental health support and good open mental health culture. Think about the credit positiveness of that. Think about the implications of reduced sickness as a consequence of governmental health support. Good, because people feel valued, they're less likely to become frustrated. You're less likely to have, you know, people who are unsettled in teams and you know, some of the issues that can come with that. So yeah, it's a no-brainer for me. What's not to like?
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's just perhaps bring it to a close, if that's all right. So you know, we've talked a bit about, well, not a bit, we've talked a lot about different things that organizations can do. So if we were to distill it into some concise advice, you know, what would your advice be to other leaders who want to explore increasing that awareness and wanting to do something about mental health in their organizations, but perhaps don't know where to start? So you talked earlier about starting small, but, you know, if we were going to really make this concise, what would it be?
So think about your own, as a leader, think about your own mental health and think about how much you're prepared to share. Start small, but actually then talk to your employees and get from them what they think needs to happen to create a mentally healthy culture in your organisation. Create a plan and do it.
Brilliant.
And for a small donation to Mind, I will come and talk in those organisations. People want to donate something to Mind, I'll come and talk about my story, do something about what I've done today, because, you know, I just want to start a conversation. My dad worked down a coal mine for 35 years, a job he hated. He absolutely hated it. For a whole variety of reasons. My husband no longer works as a result of poor mental health practice at work. If I can begin a conversation in an organisation, or anybody can begin a conversation in an organisation that says, here's how you do it, you just open your mouth and you speak, then I'm happy to do that, but I would like Mind to benefit from that, please.
Absolutely, that's brilliant, thank you. I'll definitely include some links in the description supporting the video, Aileen. So if people want to find you, if they want to, you know, contact you, where are you? How can they contact you?
Right, so I'm at Bushbell on Twitter. There's a long story to my Twitter handle, but you can follow me on Twitter at Bushbell. I talk about all sorts on there. I talk about my children, I talk about work, I talk about all sorts of things. You can contact me through the Grand Union website, but it's aileen.evans@guhg.co.uk. You can find out more about the Shine a Light campaign from the CIH websites, that's the Chartered Institute of Housing. You can find out more about that. You can download the employer commitment guide, which has got some case studies and some how-tos and all sorts. You can download that from GU, Grand Union, Mind, or CIH. And yeah, and there's, I've done a couple of videos. I've done sessions at conferences and all sorts of bits and pieces. So, you know, normally there'll be something on Twitter that says where I am and what I'm doing. So I'm doing something for women in housing tomorrow, which I'm really looking forward to too.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you. Any parting thoughts, or shall say goodbye?
Well, just thank you, Cami. Thank you really for giving me the opportunity to talk about it, because I think the more we talk about it, the easier it gets. And creating happiness and joy at work is kind of a bit of a life's mission, and we can't do that if we don't take mental health seriously. So thank you very, very much for...
Those are amazing closing comments. Joy and happiness in the workplace. Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I know you're so busy, so I'm really grateful for the time you spent on this.
Do you know what? There's always time for this.